Grab your battle pass and your helmet because today we're going to the most contested region in Kenshi, with slavers, cannibals, rebels, samurai, and even sweatpants saints all throwing hands for the sake of their own cause. Bast is locked in a perpetual state of conflict, not unlike what we've observed for centuries in Eastern Europe and the wilderness of RuneScape. Some might even avoid this region altogether, since passage through the skim sands to the south is much easier to navigate by comparison. But despite these ongoing hostilities, Bast still emerges as a potential place to build a base for your faction, due to having several crucial benefits we'll discuss throughout this guide. Starting off strong, Bast has arid fertility with a fair amount of water available, making it suitable for growing essential crops. Bast also has an abundance of iron and stone, which matches up well compared to other zones. The only primary resource Bast lacks then is copper, with some areas having no copper at all within a 1,000 meter radius. For this reason, you may need to forego copper if you want to set up in a specific part of Bast. To give some more detail on the madness you'll see when traveling in Bast, the main conflict here is the ground war between the Holy Nation and the United Cities. Due to past war crimes committed by these factions, they take every opportunity they can to battle against each other. Layered underneath this main conflict are the encroaching cannibal tribes to the north, who will try to capture and barbecue any other faction they see. And then there's the beef between rebel farmers and the United Cities, which you may see fighting from time to time. In terms of wildlife, Bast has hardly any to speak of. Bone dogs and skimmers are rare sightings that don't have much of a bearing on the difficulty of the region. What does impact the overall difficulty, though, is the size of human groups, which reach epic proportions at times. Bast is for human spawns what the Bone Fields is for animal spawns, and it's not uncommon to see Holy Nation and United City squads exceeding 20 or even 30 in number. For the Holy Nation, quantity is emphasized more than quality, with unarmored Holy Chosen and Holy Servants making up most of the units in patrols. Paladins and Sentinels lead these squads with heavy upper body armor and armor-piercing swords. In contrast, the United Cities has lighter weapons with decent quality armor on its Samurai Scouts and Conscripts. At the top of the pecking order are, of course, Samurais, which tout Samurai armor along with their own light weapons. While keeping peace with these major factions may be desirable, each have significant obstacles for keeping positive relations. The United Cities requires a 3,000 cat tax be paid each week, and they'll also take issue with you if you start growing hemp at your base. Meanwhile, the more prudish Holy Nation has prayer day each week, restrictions on anything robotic, and don't even think about growing hemp either, or they'll send the DEA after you for growing unholy herbs. Since faction relations are perhaps the most important factor when settling Bast, where you decide to settle ought to take into account where each faction has deployed the vast majority of its troops. For example, if you settle towards the southern or the eastern part of Bast, cannibals will be incredibly rare since they originate in the northwest. Alternatively, settling in the west ensures you'll see the Holy Nation all the time, and the same can be said for settling in the east and seeing tons of samurai patrols. Do with this information what you will, but be warned, going hostile with multiple factions in Bast may not be something your squad can handle, and with cannibalism always being a possibility, you might not get your characters back should they fall. All these things considered, I don't have typical location recommendations for Bast, since your base should be less about copper and iron, and more about what factions you're planning to fight. If you do care about copper, your options are pretty limited, but these two options here are a pretty good fit. In contrast, if you're more so looking to settle a certain part of Bast, you can just look for a plot of flat land with some iron nearby and you'll be ready to go. Starting things out on my own base, we naturally started pumping out armor plates for trading. With the abundance of iron in Bast, plate beating ends up being an ideal source of income, and it's pretty easy to rack up a ton of iron by melting down armor and weapons from fallen units nearby. Even if you do keep peace with the major factions in this area, you'll always have the opportunity to scavenge around, loot unconscious bodies, and then melt down the weapons and armor for even more iron. Plate beating also trains armor smithing for a profit compared to leather tanning, which usually doesn't have a profit margin. For one armor plate, you need 4 iron. On average, this nets you 144 cats in profit, and in less than a week, you can train up an armor smith to the point where they can make heart protectors for even better income. Alternatively, your armor smiths can craft armor for your faction, so you stand more of a chance against the local threats you'll be facing. Keeping armor smithing and other forms of production up and running is no easy task though, given that you'll be under constant attack from other factions. Within my first couple of days in Bast, I managed to trigger 4 different attacks. One from the Holy Nation, one from the cannibals, one from the slave traders, and another from the sand ninjas. This was on top of being harassed pretty frequently by Holy Nation patrols. For the sake of my sanity then, I kept my mouth shut and paid taxes, since I didn't want to fight the United Cities and the Holy Nation at the same time. It wasn't all bad though, because some faction visits were from the Western Hive and the Traders Guild, so we had some extra trading opportunities without having to leave our base. The resources these caravans supplied were much appreciated, since independently producing all the needed resources was hard to do, while half of my characters were recovering from critical injuries or suffering from phantom limb pains. Over the course of several days, we eventually got our shit together and kept things going. Our struggle climaxed when High Inquisitor Seda paid us a visit. He killed 2 of our characters and left us with piles of unconscious bodies to clean up. But that was the worst of it though. Holy Nation calmed down after he managed to pummel us, and in true Kenshi fashion, most of our characters survive out of pure spite and return to their jobs stronger than before. Overall, I say Bast is hard to compare to other regions since it's not a traditional place to live. Copper is far too rare for it to be considered a top-tier place to settle, and you'd be much better living off in Sinkun or the northern coast if you wanted a well-rounded base. What Bast does provide, though, is an unparalleled opportunity to train your characters. You won't see difficulty this high till you live somewhere in the southeast. And as strong as the Holy Nation and the United Cities are, they won't skin you or eat you, so it's only the cannibals who pose a lethal threat to your characters if your characters have a good amount of toughness. It's worth noting that Sneak is incredibly easy to train here too. All you'll need to do is find a large patrol for a hostile faction and follow that group around at a distance. In less than a minute here, I'd take a skeleton character from 0 to 60 Sneak without any problems. The Sneak skill is an important tool for surviving in Bast as well, since your squad will be wiped out entirely on multiple occasions. When you do have a squad wipe, having a character who can reliably move around to heal dying characters is vital to minimizing casualties. On a different note, Bast has location in its favor, being in between 2 major factions, having World's End in the northwest and Western High villages in the northeast. These options give you the flexibility to make war with multiple factions while still having shops close by to trade at. I'd argue that Bast holds a firm position as a mid-game settle. You won't want to touch it until you have more than 10 well-trained characters, but if you already have elite soldiers, it's hard to justify settling Bast above more appealing endgame locations. Broadly speaking, the combat in Bast can take characters into the 50s or even 60s, which sets them up wonderfully for traveling to the most dangerous regions in the game. I guess I'll leave it up to you, though, to decide if all that juicy XP is worth putting your character's life and limb at risk. And just as a heads up before I dip out here, this summer I've decided that the channel will be expanding into Star Sector. I've spent a great deal of time considering what kind of games would be a good fit alongside Kenshi, and Star Sector is the strongest candidate. I've already played it for hundreds of hours, and I can't wait to kickstart a Star Sector series in the summer. I'll take my leave for now, but I'll see you all in the next upload.